Thank you so much, David. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and fellow travelers, it's very exciting here. We can have this conversation with Cory and Kristen, and maybe a few words how this idea was born. We very often speak with David Rowan about the necessity to go beyond the fear of pooling knowledge. So when I was asked to interview Cory, and we've collaborated before in the context of an Art Basel conference with Cory, I told David it could be very, very interesting because obviously we know each other from the art world, that we find a speaker and we can have a dialogue who actually is interested in similar things from a different end in the world of technology. And David and also Monique, with whom we had a wonderful dialogue then, had the idea that we could have this encounter. So it's an experiment because actually Cory and Kristen never met. We will see maybe if this can produce reality, because obviously one of the things which is interesting, if we talk about games, and you both obviously work with games, as David said in the introduction, Kristen has invented many games, he's a games entrepreneur, and Cory in his work very often has deconstructed, one can say, games. And if one looks at history, it's interesting that actually such visionary designers as maybe Munari or also Enzo Mari have actually collaborated in the invention of games of the 20th century. So maybe the question if in the 21st century the world of games digitally could again be a collaboration also with artists. But before we discuss that, just to give you an idea of these two very different practices, I thought to maybe ask a few questions to Kristen and to Cory to give you an idea how they started, and also give you an idea what they're working on now, and give you an idea maybe how they see the future. So to begin, I wanted to ask Cory if you could tell us a little bit how it all started, how you came to art, you came to technology, if there was an epiphany, or if it was a gradual kind of process.
Yeah, I mean, I could answer the art one first. You know, always had made stuff, you know, from a kid on, like probably a lot of people, but I grew up in Buffalo, New York, in the States, and there was a public access video art television show that was on once a week. It was called Axel Grease. And so I just remember as a kid, you'd be flipping through watching TV, and then I think it was channel 13, and then all of a sudden you would just see like flashing colors or somebody like walking back and forth. You would just see like totally the weirdest stuff. And so that I think like was my first introduction to art, and it was against television. Like that TV didn't have to be what I had seen before, you know. And what was the other question? Now I already forgot the other question. How did I come to art? Oh, and how did I come to technology? Well, had an Apple IIgs. That was my first big computer, and you know, always loved computers. And then when I got to college in '96. This college I went to, the Oberlin Conservatory of Music, had just installed a T1 line, and that just like, I got on the web and just like, I had never looked back. I mean, those are the two epiphanies in my life.
And how did this whole idea of failure begin? Because the great Cedric Price, one of the visionary Englishmen from the 20th century, he's one of the great architects and cybernetic expert. So interesting also for this whole conference here, I think, because he early on brought architecture with technology. Cedric Price always said, why is it so difficult to sort of work about failure? How did that sort of topic of failure enter your work?
You know, it's hard to say. I mean, I think I hate to bring up stuff when I was like a teenager, but I just remember on my Apple IIgs, I made it was like when I was able to start making things that looped, right? Like, so on the 2GS, there was like Paintworks Gold, does anyone remember what the 2GS, was it Paintworks Plus? Anyway, I'm getting like blank looks. Am I like, oh my God. What was it?
I think it was just Paintworks.
Paintworks.
Needed to invent the Plus or the Pro.
Yeah. Paintworks had an animation function, and it was when I started to be able to loop animations that I started. I had made one, and it was the guy just sitting in a chair, just like flipping through TV channels forever. And so it's the idea of like, the idea is as long as something is plugged in that it doesn't do anything. I've always loved the idea of computers, or when I first started computer programming, I would love to let a computer crunch numbers that had no point. Like I'd get up in the morning and I would see the result, but the computer was doing nothing all night. Like I love maxing out processors for no purpose. You know what I mean? Seriously. And now it's even better with cloud computing. Like the kind of things you can max out are almost infinite. Like if you've seen those like
Still restricted by your wallet.
Those
right?
10-hour YouTube videos are a beautiful example of like a waste of technology and resources to the maximum, and it's beautiful.
But the cloud computing thing is obviously also a great bridge to art, because I mean, clouds play such a big topic in art history. And I found a lovely conversation you did with one of the great painters, Mary Hallman, where she and you discuss about clouds. And also Steffi Czerny is here in the conference, and Steffi Czerny, founder of DLD, we did with her a big conference which actually brought together art history and cloud computing. I was reading this morning about your clouds. Can you tell us a bit? It's interesting because it connects really technology with art history.
Yeah, so in 2002, I made a piece called Super Mario Clouds, and it was the Mario Brothers Nintendo cartridge, and I had modified the cartridge, which is like, now it's pretty, I mean, then it was actually pretty common. It's like, you take out the chip and you make a new chip and you solder it in there. And what my cartridge had done is it was nothing but the blue sky and the clouds. So the game was, there was no interactive element. It was just the clouds going by slowly. And so, I mean, and then back then I had done it. It was kind of a riff on art history, to be honest, and they were just kind of the most accessible clouds that I could get my hands on.
And one other thing is maybe appropriation. When I entered the art world in the 80s, and that was kind of pre-internet, there was appropriation was a big topic. And many artists in the 80s, there was appropriation art.
Yeah.
And you, obviously, in the digital age, have worked a lot with appropriation. And very often, when you use, for example, video games, you kind of actually, you don't add, you take stuff away. You strip them of certain things. You take interactivity away. Can you tell us a little bit about your form of appropriation and to which extent it might differ from previous appropriations in the art world?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely come from appropriation of, I think, the generation where, it wasn't a conscious decision, it wasn't a critical decision, it was literally like defined by the tools. Meaning like, as a kid, I mean, I grew up with copy and paste. That's the best way to explain it. Like, I grew up with the ability to manipulate digitally, and so like anyone of my generation and younger, it's the kind of way. It's like the vernacular way to express yourself. It's just what you do. It's not, it wasn't top down. And you see that now with most expression on the internet. It's based in copying and paste. There's so much stuff out there, in which lends it. It's just the environment that we live in. I think lends itself to that being the most easy route for. Not the most easy route. I hate to say anything is the most anything, but one way to make stuff which doesn't have much friction. Does that make sense? I feel like I don't know if I really explained myself.
It's perfect. And maybe a last question, because they're looking here at a lot of
I don't know. I forget what I said. Yeah, what's going on? It's funny. It has like the catalog number. I just got that. I'm really proud of that.
Well, maybe you can tell us a little bit about
Yeah. Well, these are these huge photographs I've been making, which are actually just default Photoshop gradients. And the instructions to make that image is the title of the piece. You could see that. And if you click that one click on Photoshop, you'd actually make that image. And so I have a show down the road right now that has a bunch of those. And they're all just one clicks. A lot of things I've been making lately are like work that uses a computer that literally takes a second to make. And this is another example. So and so they kind of are part Photoshop, part art history, part landscape, but but I guess in the end it's I don't know. In the end, I have no end. So that's what it is.
And last question is about the future. What are you kind of working on at the moment? What's next? You've had lots of shows in London. There was the Barbican show in the Curve. There is the show you mentioned Listen right now. So what's next?
Oh, this is. You all like this. I'm going to make some books and records. I just have this like doomsday scenario lately of just like the power's going to go out. Like we're all done. If I don't get it in a book soon, it's going to never ever exist. So I'm going to spend about a year making some stuff that will literally need to be burned to disappear.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Cory. Now questions for Christian. I wanted to begin also with the beginning and with your epiphany. Was there an epiphany which led you to become a game entrepreneur? Or was it a gradual process?
No, I mean, it's, I guess I was sort of destined to it in some ways. I grew up really loving computer games as a little kid. I grew up in the countryside in Finland, pretty much in the middle of nowhere. And one of the great joys I had was to play games with my older brother. Actually, we were fiercely competitive on the Commodore 64. A very, very basic game. Pretty much any game on the Commodore 64, I would have played it. And literally, my mom used to tell me back then, if I don't stop playing games, I'll never get myself a proper job. And, turns out she's a visionary. But I mean, from there on, I mean, I did end up, I actually studied economics at university and did things which I felt were kind of responsible, but then I sort of fell back into games around, just over 10 years ago when I set up my first company, which is a mobile games company. It still goes on today, then called Macrospace, now called Glue Mobile. And I spent 6 years. What I guess always attracted me to games was that it's so unique that it is you're creating a form of media which combines art and design with cutting edge technology with entertainment, and plus you make millions of people smile. I mean, how bad can it be, right? So, and then that idea that, especially like the thing that I loved about mobile games back when, this was way pre-iPhone or any of those things that people know about now, but rather that idea that you were so constrained, you had literally 64 pixels on the 64 by 58, for example, pixels on the screen, and that's all you could do, black and white. So you could literally go back to those gaming experiences I had as a kid and see if I could recreate that sense of delight from very simple things on a screen on mobile phones. And having spent then 6 years building that, and those phones becoming very capable, and you being able to make big games, and also mobile games becoming very distribution centric, where it was really not so much about is your game great and do people love playing it, but back then more about can you get network operators to actually stock your game, can you get it on the list to be featured. After that, and we had IPO'd and we were a big company, I actually wanted to get back to making products straight to consumers, and setting up Playfish was really, the epiphany there was having observed Facebook for a little bit and seeing the launch of the Facebook platform. That notion that, hey, how powerful would it be if we could take what was so good about what Nintendo had done with the Wii in demonstrating to the world that you're going to sell a lot more consoles, you're going to get a lot more people involved in games if you don't focus on the explosions and the monsters on the screen, but rather focus on the family playing together, focus on the emotions between friends, that sense of competition or cooperation or just general, where the game is really a conduit of social interaction between friends as opposed to being sort of a solitary thing you do in your underwear in front of a 42-inch plasma in the cellar, right? So, and that was really that, if you like, the fundamental insight behind Playfish. And then, so what we wanted to do then was to, as a tip to other entrepreneurs, what's really fun when you start off is think like, how big could this be, and could it be even bigger? So, and how could we even, how could we put in the most ambitious mission in the world? And for us, it was to go out and change how the world plays computer games, away from these solitary experiences to social experiences between friends. We're still on that mission today, but what was so awesome was that we launched our first product in about 8 weeks or so from start. We wanted to make a competitive brain training game between friends, who has the biggest brain. It seemed like an easy way of foray into social games, right? Make something, category games we know people like, and then try to make it as social as we can, show people's faces, put in pictures of what kind of brains they have, ranging from literally monkeys to astronauts and so on, and then try to get them to share, play together. And inviting 100 friends, and a week later seeing 1,000 people play, a week later seeing 10,000 people play, all the way up to about 1 million players by February or March in 2008, like 3 months after we launched, and growing and growing. It was just an awesome feeling. It's like all these people playing together, and and this is still a fairly basic form of social interaction. Now, what if we, instead of competition, create something around cooperation? What if, I help you, you help me, we find some way of actually feeling like we're interacting, where this game goes away from being just this sort of testosterone-driven kind of competition thing into something a bit more complex, where it becomes actually a way for me and you to keep in touch when we are maybe in a different place. And I don't necessarily want to pick up the phone rather and call you and ask how you are, but it might mean something if we do something together in a game, because it's kind of a fun, light kind of interaction. And that's been just an awesome journey to be on. It's really, back then nobody talked about social games. Nobody really thought even about social networks very much. And what's really happened over the past 4 years is, and largely driven by social networks, is we've gone from a place where maybe 200 million people, 250 million people played computer games around 5 years ago in any form. Today, 5 years later, about 1.5 billion people are involved in playing games with their friends and, either by themselves or with friends. It's just that sense that when you bring games away from being that thing that happens on the screen that must be immersive and just about you, into something that means something between you and friends. Having been sort of helping make that happen and then spawn ultimately an industry and spawn something which now has massive repercussions on games across all other platforms. I mean, I'm now part of EA, the big computer games company, and the fact that I actually now work not just across social games, but also looking at how our games need to evolve across the PlayStation and Xbox and mobile and lots of other things. And it's really, really exciting to see how some of the fundamental insights from social games are really permeating through the whole game industry right now.
I was curious about, because you told wonderfully the epiphany of Playfish. I was wondering, when I ask scientists sometimes about their invention, once a couple of years ago I spoke to Benoit Mandelbrot, the man who discovered fractals, and he was telling me, like, all of a sudden there was a blackboard, and the blackboard wasn't clean, and he saw fractals. And he remembered very much the day. It was a rainy day or a sunny day, I don't know, but he could say which day it was. Do you remember the moment Playfish? I think in terms of creativity, I would be very curious how this invention was made. Do you remember how and when it exactly occurred?
No, I think with most startups and most things, I think the real source of it would have been watching Facebook and watching Nintendo and feeling like there's something here that must be able to be explored online. But I think, actually much like the previous presentation, it was really about, hey, let's just get going. Let's just, there's something there. Let's try to get a product out as quickly as possible. Try to experiment. Does this actually work? I mean, let's try to time box the first product as quickly as possible. Try to get a sense of, do people actually play this in the way that, we kind of think it would be fun? Would other people think that it would be fun? And so I don't think there was a fundamental sort of aha moment when kind of the penny dropped or the, apple fell from the tree. It was much more of just watching these kind of mega trends happening and then getting together with some great friends, all of whom are passionate about gameplay.
And then about the future, you actually said in an interview that you somehow see in the future that the industry is set to develop beyond the Farmville and Pet Society kind of games. To quote you, there will be a ton of innovation coming up, as that style of game has been done in quite a lot of ways. So can you tell us maybe a little bit about the future?
Sure, and I think actually, again, referencing the previous presentation, the future happens very quickly in our industry in particular because of all the reasons mentioned. The social networks, things spread very quickly, and you can actually innovate very quickly off the back of what you see or be inspired by what other people do. Our biggest innovation, actually, in lots of ways since that I gave that interview was we launched a game called The Sims Social only about 7 weeks ago, perhaps. Released it to the market. It's now being played by nearly 70 million people globally. It's actually the second largest game on Facebook, growing very rapidly right now. And the fundamental insight behind that is, what we really tried to do is we got together with a team a year ago and figured out we want to push this market forward. We want to figure out how do we get away from this sort of somewhat impersonal, forced kind of social interaction that still happens between games, or of this kind of sort of finding a lost cow or something which just doesn't really tie into your real life necessarily. It's a pretty awkward bridge sometimes, into something which is actually real. Could we actually create, say, take EA's The Sims franchise, which is all about simulating life, playing with life, if you like. Could we bring that to the real world? Could we actually get friends to create their Sims and then have those Sims have relationships together and have makeups and breakups and best friends and adversaries and have all those things happen between, so that we would try to pull that game as close to reality as possible. And it's been really awesome watching that because, literally since we didn't even, I believe, start marketing that game before we had about 8 million daily active players in that game. So they spread like absolute wildfire as a result of just lots of interesting social actions happening between people. The fact that two people at work would, they would post on Facebook the fact that their Sims had just done it in the shower, or, woohooed as it's called in the game, or the fact that they are now, they are mortal enemies, or somebody planted a spider in somebody else's toilet. It's like that created a sense, and not just that interaction is posted on Facebook, people actually discuss it. They'd say, hey, hold on a second, how come, hey, hold on a second, I thought we were friends, or what's going on between you guys? And that discussion, the fact that the game was able to transcend that sort of virtual reality into becoming an object of discussion, I think that's probably the most important area of innovation. There are others, like everything is becoming mobile. I think we're going to see mobile and location context becoming more important. But more than anything, it's about bridging games from becoming things which you consume by yourself as a static product, which is kind of far away from you and immersive, into something which is very immediate, it's quick, it's with you, and it's able to play a role in your everyday life, one way or the other. So that delight of play actually becomes a way for people to keep in touch and somehow reaffirm their real-world social relationships.
And I have a question for both of you. I was wondering, you've both done so much work and realized so many different projects. And the question of the future brings us also to the unrealized project. I was wondering if in both of your practices there are kind of dreams, projects you haven't been able to do yet, projects which have, I mean, I know from Cory, from previous conversations, that there are lots of projects like the self-playing fishing video game with a guy who can never catch a fish.
Yeah.
So I was curious about both of your kind of unrealized projects.
There must be some deep psychological meaning behind that game.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like, well, you go first.
No,
You
started.
Yeah, I mean that is one of my dream projects, is to have a guy who, like, because I've been making all these games that play themselves with this little device, and yeah, just to have a guy who just, you know, like, is continually looking for the fish that never comes, or yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, the other thing I do want to get into is this cloud stuff. Just like, I don't know. I mean, this is not a dream, but I'm just going to go off the top of my head here. But just like, I always love the idea of just uploading terabytes just to servers. Do you know what I mean? Just like a TIFF that's nothing in it, and just grind up some networks. Do you know what I mean? So that isn't a specific project, but that's a direction that I want to go in. With all the stuff that you people make, I want to just like bring it to its knees.
So hence the book. I'm getting it now. Bring the digital stuff in the book before you bring everything to its knees.
Yeah, totally.
Let me know when you are going to bring things to its knees, because I'd like to know at least aware of it beforehand. For me, nothing quite as grand as that. No, that's hard to follow. So what I'm actually really passionate about is, one, the thing that was exciting both with doing mobile games and doing social games was that sense of being able to bring play to the masses, because play is something so human and so natural and so social and so basic of what we do with family and kids every day. Being able to bring that to mobile devices and then being able to bring that really to be something between friends, it's super exciting and super fun and interesting. What I'm wondering is where play can take us moving forward. Play and the way of creating these sort of designed experiences which ultimately make people smile and take people through these emotional journeys of, you know, of delight and slightly frustration and then elation and then perhaps fear sometimes, and this sort of sense of discovery, and all these kind of, by creating wonderful play experiences, we can take players through these experiences both with the game and with each other, which ultimately are very, very powerful. They're more powerful in my mind than any other form of media, because they are interactive and you feel like you have a sort of stake in the outcome, or a way of modifying the outcome. And how cool would it be if we could use some of these innovations, the fact that, you know, we have nearly 70 million monthly players playing Sim Social, how could we use some of these innovations, and how could you guys use these things in order to do good things? How about getting kids to learn better? How about being able to ensure that, you know, that healthcare presentation earlier? How about using some of those things in order to make sure that as a human race, we can actually stop spending so much time on healthcare, stop spending so much time on, or for that money on energy as earlier, like being able to bring play and that sense of kind of delight from little things. Like gamification is a huge trend, like people talk about it a lot. I actually, you know, it's sort of important, but what I'm really talking about is being able to create the same sort of emotional journeys that you go through in games when you actually switch off your heater at home and you kind of feel, yes, got there to, you know, beat that final energy boss or whatever that might be, right? You know, maybe quite not that simple, but I would love to see that. And I think there is a generation of entrepreneurs right now who are really studying what's happening in social games and other places. And I'm really, really hoping to see that, you know, when I get my, you know, next move house or something, I'm going to get into the house and I'm going to see the points, you know, somewhere, and some progress bar and some sense of what I'm actually trying to achieve through the way that I live and the way that I am. Because I think as a human race, it's just a huge opportunity for us to ultimately stop wasting so many things, live healthier, and ultimately be a happier people.
Next question, that's what we discussed before when we had a chat together, is actually the question if the two of you could collaborate. If we think historically, there have been, you know, Bruno Munari, he worked with, you know, entrepreneurs of that time, and his sort of, you know, games which he developed as an artist were worldwide, you know, used. Could that happen in the 21st century? Could the two of you collaborate? What could you do together?
So I think there's lots of opportunity between art and, like, literally computer games are a form of art, and as commercialized as they are, it is art, and a game that is not, you know, aesthetically beautiful is never going to be as successful as one that is aesthetically beautiful. So I think lots of opportunities. I'm really interested in this bringing stuff down, though. I'd be quite interested to talk about that plan and see what, you know.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, on The Sims, what happens if somebody forgets their Facebook password? What happens to their Sims? Do they die?
No, they don't die. We keep them safe for them until they recover that password.
I'm interested in all. I'm interested in all the edges of your thing.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
where are the kind of like the edges of it all? Like, are there like? Oh yeah. Anyway, I don't know if I'm being so articulate, but yeah, I can see just that there's like a million possibilities. You have so many people expressing themselves through your system that. Because one of the things that I'm interested in, or I guess maybe the main, is that when people get exposed to technology, and mass numbers of people get exposed to technology, it becomes culture, right? And what are the trends? Like, what kind of things? What kind of like human nature things start to emerge? Do you know what I mean? And you could always see it at the edges of the technologies. Do you know what I mean?
No, I think that's right. And it is really interesting because you can observe. I mean, obviously, every data point is collected somewhere, so you can actually, these are things that you can actually explore and observe.
Yeah, like who are like the people who only log on? Like, what if someone only logs onto your thing once? What do they do? Do they just like build a kitchen? Or like what are the trends that emerge that show some kind of thing about human nature that we've never thought about? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and we have lots of people doing work on that kind of thing. So if you want to join us, that'd be great.
Yeah, I would love to just like.
But the last thing I wanted to say was just actually my favorite user-generated video ever from The Sims Social was a video which has the caption, "Who is playing who?" and it shows your sim playing the computer game, like, because the sim uses the computer in the thing, and actually because the way that you control the sim in the game is the sim is separate from you, so you can kind of suggest that it does things, but it doesn't always obey you. It can sometimes say, look, I'm not interested. In a similar way, the sim goes to the computer and then effectively insinuating that it's actually controlling you behind the scenes because it's making you do stuff you didn't want to do necessarily. So that's sort of who's playing who. It was quite an interesting kind of construct, because the game is playing the player to some degree, was the players playing the game.
And
anyway, there you go.
I realize we're running out of time, but I'm very grateful, and I hope we can continue all of this on the weekend. Julia Payton-Johns, the director of the Serpentine Gallery, and I hope very much you can all come on Saturday and Sunday to the Serpentine, where David Rowan will also animate the panel. It will all be about the garden, also the digital garden. And thank you so much, Christian. Thank you so much, Cory. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was great.
Thank you.